Hello everyone. Well, here we are in the middle of the social psychology chapter, and I hope you're enjoying it. It's one of my most favorite subjects. If I could teach two things, it would be social psychology and mental disorders. Those are my favorite topics. But anyway, if you will think back with me to the first time we met, I said that I had a secret agenda for you for this class. And the secret agenda was for you to leave the class with more confidence in yourself and understanding yourself better and being stronger within yourself in the society that we live in. And I think this chapter is a really good chapter to kind of round off the ways we develop and the ways that we function in the world. And this secret goal of mine for you to know yourself is really very complex. Why do you think and why do you feel the way you do? What kind of conditioning and what kind of environment and what kind of factors went into that? And then we take the you that has formed and we put that you in the midst of a big society and we say, swim. Sink or swim, get along or don't get along. If you get along, you're well. If you don't get along, something wrong with you. When I was growing up, I grew up when I was small in a very small rural farm community. And we had a lot of poor. And my grandmother, who was the most influential person in my whole life, taught me that we were all the same, that we were all equal, that God did not make any of us any different from the other, that he loved us all, he created us all, and one person was as good as the other. Okay, so I grew up believing that, supporting that, and that was the influence that I had. I was almost 30 years old before I realized that my grandmother was a racist. She was. I don't know that she'd ever really had a conversation with a person of color, but she was actually pretty racist. When she said God created us all equal, her all was all white people, and it was poor people and people that weren't poor because that was the community she lived in. I mean, she was born shortly after the Civil War, so you have to give her a little bit of margin there, okay? But we do things that we don't understand why we do it. We regret it after we do it. That's why we have apologies. Okay? Or we like that we did it and we want to do it again. So this process of understanding ourselves and really knowing ourselves requires that we ask these questions. Where did this come from in me? How was I influenced? How was I conditioned? Only when you start to really ask those questions and dig for the answers are you able to withstand the pressures of society. Because if I had a tenth of a penny for every dollar spent on market research, I would not be here. I would be lying on the beach of my own private island. They spend that much money trying to figure out what makes you buy this product, what makes you buy this idea, what makes you buy this concept. So I think this is a real ta-da at the end of this semester. We've got one more chapter on mental disorder, but I hope you really dig into this and enjoy it. All right, talk to you later. Bye. Hi again. Well, we had been talking about coercive persuasion, and I'm sure you're familiar with a lot of those methods as well. I know I am. I see them all the time. I used to teach them when I was a sales trainer. It's kind of scary. So what we're going to look at now again is conformity. Is when we adopt the attitudes as a result of either real or imagined pressure. We conform to the group. This is slide 16. With this, we see a situation where the researcher, Ash, has these people in a room, kind of like a classroom, we'll say. Well, a lot of those people are really part of the experiment, but some of them aren't. So up on the board, they have these two drawings that we see here where it says Ash's conformity study. And the question to those people, which they were to answer out loud, was, which of the lines, A, B, or C, is the closest in length to the one on the left? Well, you would think people would
answer honestly, right? Well, they set it up like this. The people that were in on the experiment responded incorrectly. And so if they went around and they said, okay, it's A, next one says A, next one says A. So we come to the next person who's not in on the experiment, and are they going to say A, or are they going to say C, or are they going to say B? What are they going to do? Well, surprisingly enough, a third of the people that were in this study, when they did it time and time and time again, a third of them conformed to the group at least half of the time, because they would have them in more than one study like this. A third of the people, half of the time, conformed just because I suppose they were afraid of what the group would say or do if they disagreed. To me, that's just terrifying. Now, 20% of the people answered honestly and independently every time, so maybe there's some hope for us. Well, there are influences that affect conformity. On slide 17, you see A, B, and C here. If you have a prevailing social norm, a way that society usually does something, you are going to be much more apt to follow along, to conform to the rules. You know, we all have our phones now. The prevailing social norm is we have our phones, and we answer our phones when they ring, and it's really pretty rude if you stop and think about it. People have their phones on during dinner. People have their phones on when they're sitting in a restaurant. People have their phones on when they're in a public place. There has to be great big signs that say, turn your phone off. But the prevailing social norm has changed to fit that. Then, the second one here, if the culture is individualistic or group-oriented, makes a difference. Americans, we consider ourselves individualistic. We don't really think in terms of the group. But in group-oriented cultures, which a lot of Eastern, a lot of Asian cultures are, it's not about what you achieved yourself. It's about, or your class did, or the team that you're on did. It's very unsocial. It's uncool to say, I did this and I did that. So that makes a big difference. The third one here, conditions increasing conformity, is when other people are like us. If you're sitting around with a bunch of college friends, you want to be part of that group. And so you are going to conform more to the group than, say, I would. I'm never going to fit in with the college group anyway. I'm the teacher. So I'm going to have my own opinion. But if I'm sitting around with a bunch of my colleagues, other teachers, other professors, I might be more prone to conform, although I stir stuff up pretty much of the time. Number 2 under C is when the number of people who disagree with you increases, you're more likely to conform. So you disagree with the group, they pipe up and say, no, 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 we all disagree with you, you're more likely to change your mind and conform, or at least say you do, even when you don't. This comes into a lot of social situations in which you find yourself. You conform to the group for the sake of not stirring up trouble. Well, on slide 18, we see this thing called groupthink, which is another way that we are pressured by the pressures of society when perhaps we would rather not be. This is when the tendency of all the members in the group are to act like they think alike and suppress dissent. Agreement is more important than the best decision. We have to have consensus. I got so tired of that word in business because we have to have consensus. And when they would say that, the pressure to not hold your ground and say, this is a bad decision, this is not the way we should be going, it was just terrible. You just finally said, fine, fine, fine. What everybody wants, yes, 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 I agree. And this is called groupthink. And this can be clubs that you're a member of, organizations that you're a member of. It could even be classes that you're a member of. It could be a family situation that you are in the midst of. People in groups like the illusion of invulnerability. In other words, what the group says is a good thing, is a right thing. They are in the castle up in the tower, and if anybody attacks their castle of ideas, they're going to say, we are invulnerable because we all stick together. Now, in a situation like this, you are going to keep your trap shut. If you are caught in that group that does not have freedom of speech, so to speak, you're going to self-censorship. You don't even have to wait for other people to disagree with you or to disregard what you say. But then there is direct pressure to conform. And I think of teams when I think about this. I don't think I've used this example yet. Let's say you're a team member and your team sucks. You've got like a 2-40 win-lose ratio going on. You go into the clubhouse to dress out for the next game and you go, I don't even know why we bothered to do this. We suck and we're playing the number 1 team in the division. And you're just like, this is just stupid. We should have just, given this one up to them, blah, blah, blah. The whole team may turn on you. There's direct pressure to conform. The coach is going to say, well, if you don't have any more belief in our ability to get out there and pull it together, then you might as well just turn your cleats in. So what do? Again, the self-censorship comes back. But, you get booed for having a bad attitude. Groups like to have this illusion of unanimity. Everybody agrees. We are to the man, to the woman of one mind. Now, what if you don't like situations like that? I detest situations like that. And I have to tell you, I am not a member person. I have resigned from positions I've been elected to and quit the organization simply because I did not want to be in that mess. Because I do read and I do have ideas and I do have opinions just like everybody else. And I'm not very good at rolling over and playing dead. So when do you have an ability to stand up? Well, C says that groupthink is less likely to happen when the conditions for dissent or doubts are encouraged and rewarded. Let me hear everybody's ideas on this. What do you think? Why do you think that? What do you think? Why do you think that? Well, that's a good idea. Let's put this on the board and see if it applies to anything else we've put on the board. But I'll tell you what, those situations are few and far between. You may work for a company that has that in their statement, we welcome free thinkers. But I will tell you the truth. You can get in a lot of hot water in a company by believing that. For the most part, they want you to toe the line. And then there's the majority rule rather than this demand for unanimity. Okay, we're all going to take a vote and we're going to do it anonymously. And however the vote goes, that's how we'll go. Well, do you have a job where you get to vote? I don't think so. Do you belong to a whole lot of organizations that have votes on all kinds of things? Not really. Do you get to vote on your team? Well, not about anything that counts. So I really think you're in the last situation for a very long time in your life where your vote does count. If you have support for your dissent or your doubt of a position, you will at least be heard in the college environment. You may not be agreed with, but you will be listened to, and if you can support your opinion with verifiable facts, you will be respected for having it. But just saying, well, this is what I think, nah, that doesn't carry much weight. Well, on slide 19, we see something called the anonymous crowd. And sometimes we are in a bunch of people and something bad happens. And what do? Do we step out and help, or do we hang back? Let's take a situation where you're out at the stadium watching a game. We've been talking about sports. There are some stairs and somebody falls and trips and they're laying on the side or on the concrete and they're bleeding. Are you the person that goes up to help them? Or are you the person that goes, crikey, that was pretty bad. I hope somebody does something about this. Okay, typically what happens is in an anonymous crowd where nobody really knows who we are, we fail to take action. We think somebody else will do it. And it's called bystander apathy. Oh, well, surely there's a nurse here, or maybe somebody's a doctor. Well, somebody else probably called security and they're going to get a medic down here. We just stand around and wait for somebody else to do it. Bystander apathy. There was a situation in New York a number of years ago in the 50s. A young woman by the last name of Genovese was being attacked by her boyfriend or something. She was screaming for help, 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 help. People heard her. Okay, she was outside. Then the screaming stopped. Then he came back He was beating her up some more. Help, help, help. Guess what? He killed her. He killed her. And not one person went to help her. And you know what? I don't know if I would either. I'm not very big. And if this is a great big guy beating up on her, if I go over and say, hey, stop that, he's liable to turn on me. We're more careful now because how we act toward drivers that aren't driving well because we don't know how they might act. Failure to take action is something that is part of being in a group. If it happens in a work situation, we call it social loafing. In a work group, you're not anonymous, but if you have almost anonymous chores, job responsibilities that everybody has to do the same thing, people have a tendency to slack off. Have you ever worked in food service? At the end of the shift, everybody's supposed to pitch in to fill the salt and the pepper and make sure the mustard and the ketchup and, all that stuff is ready. And then napkins are rolled with the silverware in it. And if everybody's supposed to do it, you and I both know there's somebody that's going to be outside back in the alley smoking with the boss. They're just too good for that menial work. Just let other people do it. This goes all the way up to corporate groups that have to work on projects. And it's one of the reasons I almost never assign a group project here in school because I hated them. I hated them when I was a student because you always had those one or two people in the group that figured, somebody else will do it. It's a group grade. I don't want to. They wouldn't pull their weight. And this is pretty typical. Now, someday when you're a boss or a parent or whatever, and you are assigning work tasks to other people, try to make people accountable, even if it's your kids. Timmy, you do this. Sally, you do this. You do the dishes. You run the sweeper. Try to make it interesting if you can. Sometimes it just isn't interesting. Filling ketchup bottles is not interesting. But having specific assigned jobs will hold people more accountable because others will know whether or not they did their work. So the likelihood of the work getting done increases when the work is challenging and decreases when the job is boring. So each member, different job, get it done, have responsibility. Now, on slide 20, we see a term you've probably not seen here before, and I think maybe the book authors dreamed this up or somebody did. It's called de-individuation. It's the opposite of being the individual that stands out. De-individuation happens in a group situation when we lose our individual sense of self. When I'm at the stadium and I don't go help that person, there's not going to be anybody there to say, did you see Sherry Packett? She didn't do one thing to help that person out. No, because I'm anonymous in that crowd. And I've lost my sense of I'm the kind of person that would normally go forward and help somebody. So this sense of de-individuation increases when we're in these anonymous situations. We just conform to the norm. Everybody else is standing around going, oh gosh, that looks like it hurt, but not doing anything. And so we just join the group. But this is a term you need to know, de-individuation. It means losing your sense of self within the group situation. When do we become courageous? When do we say, if not me, then who? When do we step up and help the person who we're not going to get anything back for it? We're just helping them. We don't expect repayment. We don't expect fame. We don't expect to get on YouTube with it or the news even at night. And there are people that do this all the time for the sake of others. And we call this courage and this nonconformity, we call it altruism. Someone who acts altruistically is someone who takes on selfless or dangerous actions for the benefit of other people. Now, we could think Mother Teresa, but she's pretty far off. In fact, she's gone now. She's dead. So we don't have her as a model to beat us up anymore. But you know what? If we just look around us, police officers, firefighters, and in the situation we find ourselves right now with this virus, my God, the health workers that are in the hospitals without enough personal protection. And now the nurses and doctors are getting sick and dying. It's not just the old people. It's lots of people. And it's not just old people that are ill to begin with pre-existing conditions. There are young people too, in their teens and 20s and 30s, that have health issues that make them more susceptible. So these people that go out and work to benefit others are acting altruistically. There are some factors that help us determine when people are going to behave or not behave altruistically. And the first one of those is, do we perceive the need for help? Well, every once in a while on my Facebook, I see some kind of a picture and some kind of an awful situation in another part of the world that I wasn't even aware of. Or I see pictures of animals in just awful situations that I don't even want to be aware of, but I am aware of. But we have to see that there's a need first. That's why the news pushes things time and time again. There's a hurricane and the homes are blown down and the people are homeless, and you see it over and over and over and over again. And finally somebody says, I think I need to send a check off to the Red Cross, or I need to help the Salvation Army. Or maybe I'll go volunteer and do something. Maybe I should give blood. First of all, we have to see that people need help. And it's important that the news reports this, that it's online, because it's such a busy world, it's easy to miss. Once we see it, then we decide. Then it really is on our shoulders. Do I take some responsibility for that? Or do I just let it pass? Do I just stay an anonymous person in the crowd who isn't helping? Well, see, here says the cost of doing nothing is greater than getting involved. Okay, I bet if we looked at the school boards around the country, we would find that a lot of the members on the school board no longer have children in school. But these people have strong ideas about how school districts should be operated and how students should be treated and what students should know by the time they finish schooling there. They think that if they don't get involved, the school system will deteriorate, and it very well might. So the price of not going to those god-awful boring meetings is greater than the price of taking some time to do it. There's a lot of things like this. People voting for an increase in school levies. My kids are out of school. I'm not paying. I don't have any children in school. Why should I have to pay those high taxes for Liberty schools? Well, because I want an educated world coming after me, because you guys are the ones that are going to run the world when I get old. D here says you have an ally. So let's say that you have a position that's not a popular position, or a position that's going to possibly put you in danger. If you have a buddy to do it with, if you have someone else who says, yep, let's go do it together, you are more likely to do it than if you do it by yourself. Think about going to the plaza to carry your placard and to be a dissenter or to be a supporter of some particular position. The closer it gets to time to get in the car to go to the plaza, the easier it is to think of excuses not to go. But if you've got 2 or 3 friends that have got their signs and everybody's ready to go together, guess what? You'll go down there and stand on the corner and people will honk at you, and you'll make your voice heard, even if it does feel like you're screaming into the abyss. Well, sometimes with this, we can become trapped. Entrapment we think of as a bad thing, but I don't know that it always is. Let's say that you signed a petition for something, and on that petition, they wanted your name, they wanted your email address, they wanted to know if you were, a voter, what county you lived in, all that kind of thing. So you sign, yes, I want this. Okay, yes, I want medical marijuana. Once I sign that and they get my email, I have taken the initial step. Now I'm going to be inundated with emails asking me to write my congressman, write my representatives, my senators, come to a meeting, go down and, march with my placard, whatever it is. And if you say, no, I don't really do that kind of thing, they said, but you said you wanted medical marijuana in Missouri. We have to take action if we want that to happen. So, okay, I'll go this time. And once you go, then it's like, well, you went before. Why won't you go now? You find yourself defending yourself constantly because of an action that you took way back when, that perhaps now you said, I don't know if I want to be so involved in that or not. So even this thing of altruism, this thing of wanting to help other people without expecting any payback for it, can kind of get you trapped into some situations. Well, on slide 22, let's just go a different direction here for a few minutes. Cross-cultural relations. We live in a wonderful time. We live in a time where we can bump into people of different colors and different ethnicities and different backgrounds and different jobs and different educations and different everything. But one of the things that we maintain, even when we're part of this big chunky salad of all kinds of people, is our personal identity. This is our sense of self, and it's based off of some traits that we have as well as our history. And I'm really fortunate. I had a family that talked about history a lot. Actually, right now, I'm building a family tree for my kids, and I want to give it to them on a flash drive. I'd love to have it printed and put up. I'm back in the 1700s because my grandmother put into my head all of these names and all of this family that she could remember from her grandmother. So I have a real personal sense of history as well as I know myself pretty well. But I also have a social identity. This is my identity based on ethnicity, religion, and the social roles that I have. I mean, nationality, I'm an American. I am a citizen of the United States. I carry my passport proudly. Ethnically, I'm Western European. I think I have, when I had my DNA done, I had this teeny tiny little bit of American Indian. And it's like, what? And as I did the family tree, I found someone back in my French heritage that when they came to the United States, they married a half Native American woman. And that little bitty part of DNA showed up when I had it run. Religiously, I'm Christian. And religiously, I respect all faiths. And I'm not so sure that all roads don't lead to God. Whether you are Hindu or Buddhist or Muslim, I mean, we all have the same precepts. So I'm not my way or the highway about that. Social roles, we all have a lot of them. You have the role of someone's child, even though you're now their adult child. You have a role as a friend. You have a role as a student. You may have a role as an employee. All of these have different expectations that go with them. So as we look at our nationality, our history, our ethnicity, all of these kinds of things, we can look at the patterns that people adopt when they are part of our culture or when they're coming into our culture. So acculturation is the term we use for identifying with the dominant culture. People say, I'm just a hound dog American. I'm just a mix of a little bit of everything. I think my family came up from Kentucky and my other family came down from Minnesota, so I like to hunt moose. I don't whatever it is. But they identify with the dominant culture, wear the same clothes, eat quote unquote American food, just fly the flag. And that's fine. A lot of people don't even know from where their family came from. Here we have 4 patterns of ethnic acculturation and identity. And I want you to know these 4 terms and what they mean. You could see these again. Okay, bicultural. These are just terms and definitions I've given you. Bicultural means one has strong ties to one ethnicity as well as the larger culture. Okay, so I fly the American flag proudly. But if I were strongly ethnic to my background, I would also fly a French flag and maybe an English flag, because that's who I am. I'm French and English. So, but I don't. I love the fact that I'm French and English. I'm glad I can trace this all back, but, I fly the U.S. flag. Number 2, assimilated. All right, so people come to the United States and they have to decide how quote unquote American they're going to be, and also their children. How do they want their children to be reared? When people are assimilated into the culture, it means that they have taken on a strong acculturation for the U.S. culture, and they have weak feelings for their ethnic background. I have known of people that if let's say the parents came from Mexico. The children were not even allowed to speak Spanish in the house. Now, this is changing now. We know that being bilingual is a good thing. But when I was growing up, children were punished by teachers. They were punished by their parents. They were punished by everyone if they did not speak English. It was like they almost were ashamed that they had this other language. Now we have all these ethnic festivals. That's so fun. Gosh, we get to go to church festivals, Greek Orthodox festivals, Mexican festivals, Italian festivals. We all have St. Patrick's Day for the Irish. So we're all Irish for a day, but some people have very weak ethnic feelings. Like, my family came to America, we're American, that's the way it is. Then you have ethnic separatists. These people have a strong ethnic identity and a weak identity with the U.S. culture, or whatever culture they've gone to. We saw a lot of this. We still see some things from this, but it was particularly noticeable when Vietnam fell. And many Vietnamese people, for their own safety, for the sake of their lives, were brought to the United States. And children acculturated really, really quickly. But the older people that came, that were brought out, or even who came because their family came later on, they still wore their clothes that they would have worn in Vietnam. They still cooked Vietnamese food. They just really didn't care so much about becoming Americanized. They lived in small communities that were Vietnamese communities. And you still see to this day people coming to the United States and living in a community that's heavily the community that they came from. Well, they're not the only ones that do that. People retire from the United States, they become expatriates, and they go to other countries to live. And you know where they live? They live in a neighborhood with other Americans, where they can speak English, cook hamburgers, fix scrambled eggs, and do everything just the way they did it in the United States. But yet they've chosen to live in another country. So don't go, oh, well, if they wanted to come here, they should act like, Americans. Well, let me tell you, when Americans move to other countries, we still act like Americans. We do not do well at assimilation or acculturation. And then there are people that are marginalized. And these folks are kind of like people without a country. They don't have a strong sense of the country their foreparents came from, of their ethnic background, but the dominant culture does not welcome them in either. You find this sometimes, especially with people who have come from war-torn countries on the African continent. They come and perhaps they're just doing good to have survived their life. They get here, they want to be Americans, but people look at them and go, well, where do you come from? Where do you come from? And aren't very welcoming. So these people are marginalized. They've been put on the margin of society, and in some ways, emotionally as well as socially, they're kind of homeless. So with this thing of being American or French or British or whatever, there's this term ethnocentrism. And this is when you believe that your culture or your ethnic group is superior to others. It creates this real, we are superior and you, the thems of the world, are inferior. Americans are pretty well known for being ethnocentric and jingoistic, which is a term you can look up, jingoism. For instance, when we travel in foreign countries, we try to observe the customs of that country. Not the American customs, but the customs of the country. Do the women dress conservatively? What do people eat? How do people act? we really go to other countries to experience that. If I'm in a Muslim country, I will either always have my scarf with me or I will have my hair covered, as I did in Egypt. Part of that was practicality because the wind is dry and hot and full of sand and dirt, and you would just have to wash your hair every night. But the other thing is, it's a conservative culture. And the women in particular dress conservatively when they're in public. And if I had run around in a tube top and a pair of shorts, I would have felt totally out of place. But I did see people like that, and they were Americans. This thing of we're better. Another example of this when I travel is people will start talking to people from another country in English and expect them to know English. You're in their country, you would think that perhaps you would have picked up a few words of their language. And when the person says, no English, then the Americans are mad. They're mad. Well, shouldn't they, isn't that the international language? Well, you don't speak multiple languages, and unless you can speak that language when you're in their country, you have no right to get aggravated. It's always polite to first say, excuse me, but do you speak English? It's not an expectation. It's a question. So a certain amount of ethnocentrism, socially and economically, we have things that other countries don't have, but I know there are things like that other countries have that we don't have, like medicine for everybody. Group conflict and prejudice consists of negative stereotypes of the group and a strong emotional dislike of its members. Some people don't like fat people. Some people don't like Muslims. Some people don't like gays. Some people don't like people of color. Some people don't like people that are too short. Short men are less likely to get hired than tall men, unless you're strangely tall. Some people don't like divorcees. Some people don't like Jews. I mean, what is wrong with us as a society or as human beings where we nitpick these tiny little things to dislike an entire group of people about? Now, if you want to dislike murderers and child beaters and wife beaters, I'm cool with that. I don't care much for them either. But this just normal everyday people, I don't even know. How many of you don't like green people? The truth of the matter is you probably never even sat down and talked to a green person. You just grew up with this attitude because that was the attitude in your household. So there are some reasons that people behave in these prejudicial ways. Now, let me define a couple of things for you. Prejudice is an attitude. Prejudice is what you think. I think that all green people are dumber than I am. That's a prejudice. But discrimination is if I act toward green people differently than I would to blue people or lavender people. So you see, I have colorful people here at the bottom of the slide. So why do we act this way? Well, first of all, to ward off feelings of doubt and fear. Fear of what? Fear that they won't measure up, fear that they'll move into the neighborhood, fear that they'll marry your daughter or son. Fear of what? But, people are scared of people that they don't know and they don't understand the way they do things. So if I hate them and make them the enemy, then I don't have to feel that doubt and fear about it anymore. Number 2 here, a tonic for low self-esteem. Okay, if I feel bad in society because I don't have a nice house, I rent a ratty apartment, and I don't have a nice car. In fact, I have to hitch a ride a lot. And I don't have a job that I really want to admit to anybody that I have been, married more times than I think is acceptable or whatever it is, okay? People with low self-esteem, what they try to find is some group that they can vilify and make worse than they are. If you live in a shabby house, now you can look down on people that have an even shabbier apartment or are homeless. You've got a crap job. Now you can look down your nose at people that all they have is a part-time job and they're having to get public assistance. So makes you feel better about yourself, not because you're better, because we're pretty much the same, but because you have more than they do. Prop yourself up however you need to. And then number 3 here, the economic benefits and justifications of a major group. and job competition. When legislation went through that said corporations and companies had to hire women, had to hire minorities, all minorities, boy, did this cause a stir. And you might have somebody old and cranky in your family that still hates those laws that were passed back in the Johnson era, back in the rights eras. And I actually owe my job that I had for years in corporate America to these laws that said you have to hire minorities, because there hadn't been women in the job that I first took. It was always a man's job. Just like medicine used to be a man's job. Well, doctors and men. And we still have a tendency to talk about doctors as he and lawyers as he, even though women are outpacing them. But I do this exercise when we're in class. But we can't do that, but I'll tell you what it is. First of all, I have all of the guys in the room that are 100% white, Caucasian, or at least they think they are, to stand up. And they stand up. And there's quite a few of them, not a lot, but a few. And I say, okay, guys, you're white and you're going to be college educated. You are guaranteed the cream of the crop job. Ooh, aren't you lucky? Now, I'd like everybody else in the room to stand up. And everybody looks at me like I'm crazy. I say, okay, stand up. I say, okay, white educated guys, you get those jobs unless these people beat you out for the job, because they're going to compete and now they get to be hired too. Ooh, ouch. You may all sit down now mentally. This is what happened when people that weren't white males started getting these jobs and the competition got stiffer. Suddenly, the people who were, thinking that it should be the way it used to be were very hostile, very hostile. And I would tell you at first that being a female in a job that had typically been a man's job was no easy place to be, not even in corporate America. It could get pretty mean-spirited. So there's all kinds of prejudice. So with this thing of others, we have a tendency to stereotype others. When we stereotype all members of a group, we assume that they all have common traits. The stereotype for accountants is dry, humorless, no fun bean counters. Now, is that true of all accountants? I doubt it very much, but that is kind of the stereotype that people have of them. It used to be that motorcyclists had a really bad stereotype. The guys had beards and they had long-haired ponytails and they were overweight and they wore black leather and they drank Jack Daniels with beer and they were scary and dangerous and all of that sort of thing. And there was a time years ago when there were some motorcycle gangs out in California that were pretty dangerous, pretty psychopathic, but not so much now. But still, there are people that see motorcyclists as these menaces to society. I have a former student that owns a restaurant here in Liberty, which is pretty much a biker bar. She's a great gal, and they do all kinds of rides for charity and collect money and, wonderful organizations. And motorcycle clubs go and they do things at funerals and they carry the flags. My allergist goes to Sturgis with his Harley Davidson every year. My son rides, my daughter rides, my son-in-law rides, and my daughter-in-law did ride, but she never was real comfortable. But she did ride for a long time and rode on the highway. So, bikers are not bad people. And stereotypes aren't always wrong. They can help us have kind of a shorthand, a way to organize our thinking about something or to retrieve information or know how to act in a particular situation. But stereotypes can be dangerous. You've got to be careful. One of the things they do is they underline all the differences between the groups. My group drinks. Your group doesn't drink. Who's better? Well, I don't think either one is better. Some people may, to go along with that, some people may go to church on Saturday and some people go to church on Sunday. Does that make one better than the other? Nope. It certainly doesn't. Does it matter if you have a motorcycle and I don't have a motorcycle? Nope, it doesn't make any difference unless you ask me to go riding and I have to ride with somebody. You see what I mean? It's us, them. We do it this way and they do it that way. Okay, so it can produce negative feelings toward people. It also lets us have something called select perception. Selective perception means that we see what we expect to see. And I'll give you an example of this. It's one I use almost every year. I used to live in Oklahoma City. And as you probably know, Oklahoma has a wonderful big Native American culture. And I had this jerk that worked for me that had this stereotyped and prejudicial attitude about American Indians. They're all drunks. They're all drunks. I mean, he would just harp about they were just all drunks. I don't know what his problem was. So anyway, as I had to do sometimes, I was riding with him as we went out to call on one of his customers. And we passed the bus stop down in Oklahoma City. And this is kind of a sketchy neighborhood. Okay, there's no McMansions there. And on the curb out in front of the bus station is a fellow sitting on the curb, and he's having a little snort out of his brown paper bag. He looked to be Native American, okay? This jerk that works for me says, see, he's pointing out the window like an idiot. See, I told you they were all drunks. And I just wanted to throw him out of the car. I said, you see one person day drinking, and he does look like he's hard up for, he's probably homeless too. But suddenly everyone that's Native American is an alcoholic? I don't think so. What he was seeing was what he expected to see. He was having selective perception as he viewed the world. And the last thing is, it underestimates the differences within the group. We think they're all alike, but they aren't all alike. You could say, well, absent-minded professors, all they want to do is read books and sit in their library and grade papers, and they're dull and boring, and all they know about is the class they teach. No, that's not really true. My husband and I went over to St. Louis for a Nightwish concert. If you know Nightwish, you know that's not what you think of professors doing, okay? I even had green in my hair and my motorcycle jacket on. But yes, I am a liberal college professor, but lots of interest. So don't minimize the potential people have to be your friends or to be your associates or to be interesting or kind or loving. Get to know people first. Varieties of prejudice. Prejudice and discrimination, an aside here. I used to think that when all the old farts died, this is when I was younger, when all the old farts died, that prejudice and discrimination would go away. Because surely we were better educated, more knowledgeable, more out there in the world, meeting all the nice people that were different than we were, that when those old farts died, it would be the beautiful world. And we would all sing Kumbaya and sit by the bonfire at night. And it didn't work out that way. I'm now one of the old farts, and guess what? There is so much prejudice and discrimination in this world, it just makes me crazy. If you are young and you discriminate or you're prejudiced, you need to work on this now before you get old and cranky. Okay, well, let's look at overt attitudes. These are the people with the big mouth. These are the people that don't like the green people, that don't like the gay people, that don't like the people from other countries, and they talk about it. They are, go back to where you came from. Very overt, very out there with their attitudes. They will tell anybody. Symbolic racism is kind of interesting in a sickening sort of a way. We know it's not politically correct to speak disparagingly of other ethnic groups of people. I really don't even like the term race because we're all the human race, okay? There's only one race. Okay, so different ethnicities though. So what they've done, they've confused color with race, but now they'll talk about those folks that are on welfare, those folks that have to have Medicaid. Those poor people that are living in the camps. They talk about people not as individuals and not slurring them directly, but using those key words like welfare and Medicaid and camps as code for the hateful things they would have said back in the 1950s. They've taken these social situations and turned them into their little magical, you know what I mean, kinds of phrases. Makes me crazy. How do we measure racism? I was going to have you do something online, another exercise, but it's not going to work out very well since we're not meeting in class. But, if you walk up to somebody and you ask them a direct question, excuse me, are you racist? Are you prejudiced? Do you discriminate? Well, they're going to say no. And some people, quite honestly, don't even realize they are, because they have grown up in an environment where this attitude is so prevalent that they don't see it as an attitude. They see it as a truth. And you may notice that if you've got old relatives in your family, that when they grew up, that's just what you said. That's just what you thought. It was like it was true then. So what you have to do is you have to ask people indirect questions, kind of slide in sideways, and then when you if you say to them, gee, looks to me like you're pretty prejudiced, they'll get very angry with you. So it's kind of hard to do. People used to say, well, how would you feel if your daughter married a fill in the blank? Well, I think those people are fine. I don't mind those people being in the United States, but oh no, I don't want my daughter marrying one of them. Okay, you're a racist. All right. So asking indirect questions, observing the verbal behavior of people when they're angry. When people are pissed off, they do not put a filter on it. And suddenly all of the nasty slang terms for people's faith or their ethnicity or anything else come out. I mean, even Hollywood stars, the guy who played Kramer, I don't know if he was drunk or what, but I mean, he went on a rant. I think Mel Gibson's done the same thing. Those people, it makes me nuts. But watch them when they're out of control. Watch them when they're drunk. People say, well, he didn't really mean it. He was drunk, or she didn't mean it. She was drunk. My belief is that those thoughts were in there the whole time. It's just when you're sober, you have the ability to put a lid on it. And when you've been drinking, your inhibitions are gone. And so it pops out. And then use implicit measures. Okay, we know what explicit is. Explicit is out there, you can see it. And implicit is kind of like that indirect question situation. I wish we could have done the Harvard implicit test. If you're interested, go on harvardimplicit.com. You will find this. You can take a different test looking if you have a preference for one group over another group. Old people versus young people, women over men, gays over straights, straights over gays, blacks over whites, whites over Muslims, Muslims over Hindus, all kinds of combinations of stuff. It's a really interesting site, and it's gone on for years, and it's this huge meta-analysis. So it's called Harvard Implicit. So how do we get rid of this stuff? We can read all the books we want to read. We can see all the TV specials we want to see. We can do everything we do. I am heartened that I see you guys, my students, hanging out in the halls, hanging out over getting a Coke or some lunch or something with people that are different from you. That's a plus to me. That's a plus to me, that maybe things are getting a little bit better. But then I turn on the TV and I see hate crimes increasing statistically, and that bums me out again. So let's look at some of these idealistic things that might help prejudice. First of all, both sides have equal status and economic standing. Equal status, economic standing. That means that you apply for the job, you apply for the mortgage, you apply for the loan, you apply for whatever it is you want, and you are just as likely to get it as the next person. Economic standing. I've always had my own personal credit card, even when I was married to my ex-husband, and when I'm married to my husband now. I've always had my own credit card account. Nobody else is on my card, just me. And after almost 15 years of being divorced, I answered something in a visa thing they sent me that let them know that I was divorced. I hadn't kept it a secret. They reduced my credit limit by 40%. 40% reduction in my credit limit. I had a high credit limit. I never used it anyway. I had been single. I had been divorced with this credit card for almost 15 years. And I'd had it for 10 years before that. And you know what? I pay it in full every month. I never pay interest. But when they found out I was single or divorced and female, they cut it. Now, does that sound like I have equality economically or in status? No, I don't think so. I didn't challenge it. It just ticked me off. Number 2 here, both sides have the opportunity to work and socialize together, both formally and informally. Okay, well, working together, that's not too hard. I mean, we all do kind of work together now, I think. But if you were invited to a party and the person having the party said, okay, and bring your +1, and your +1 turned out to be handicapped, in a wheelchair, different color, different religion, different language, different something from the norm, would you be comfortable? Would the group be comfortable? That would be informal socializing. Yeah, I would like you to meet my friend from Uzbekistan. Don't speak much English, but you're just going to love her. All right. So people still look, well, yeah, I'll work with them, whoever the theys are, but I don't want to have to hang out with them after work, okay? That's the attitude that goes with that. Number 3 here, both sides must have moral, legal, economic support of the authorities. Legal's interesting. Sometimes people say, and I know this is true, that they live in a poor, crime-ridden neighborhood, and if they call the police, nobody will come. If they call for an ambulance, nobody will come. In other words, the authorities do not respect them, afraid of them, whatever it is, but they don't get support. Economic support. Let's say you've had the same job for 20 years, and it's not a great job, but it's a steady job, and you've done really well at it. And you go to the mortgage company because you want to buy your first little house. You've lived in apartments all this time. Are they going to look at the difference in you and what the norm is? Or are they going to say, wow, you've worked at the same job for a long time. You've gotten some raises in there. You're a citizen of the world. Yeah, we'll consider you for a loan. You bet. No, but you're different. Don't forget, you're different. Now, we're supposed to have freedom of religion in this country, but it seems like it's freedom of religion as long as it's Christian, and not much real freedom or respect for people who aren't Christian. And in being Christian, which I am, there are people who I grew up hearing that Catholics weren't Christian. Isn't that the most ridiculous thing you ever heard? But that's how it was when I was growing up. People were prejudiced against Catholics. Number 4, both sides cooperate in working toward a common goal. You know what? You aren't the only one that's prejudiced. People of different situations in life, people of different colors, people of different faiths, people of different ethnicities, people of different weights, people of different sexuality may not like you either. They may think that, all people like you or like me are bad, evil, whatever. We are the them to other people. It's when we all put down our hatchet, when we all sit around the fire together, that we get something done. As long as one group hates another group, we're going to keep these attitudes cooking, and it doesn't serve anybody. It doesn't serve anybody. It just tears us apart. It tears our society apart. Well, here's a few terms that I forgot to work into the presentation earlier. One of those is cognitive dissonance. This is a combination of the way we think and the way we feel. Many times what we think and what we feel are entirely different. Let's say I have a job. Part of my job is selling something that I believe is inferior, and I don't think people should buy it. We have a perfectly good product that would work just as well, but this product is going to fall apart or be of no value down the road. So what I feel is it's wrong to sell this, but my boss says you sell it or else you're out of here. This is what we're selling this week. So you're saying these things, here, buy my XYZ, whatever it is that you know to be at fault, and the whole time going, man, I shouldn't be selling this stuff to people. I'm just stealing from them almost. So this dissonance, this argument within yourself between what you think or what you have to do and what you feel come into conflict. I want a new car, but I know I shouldn't buy it because I don't have the money. See, feelings are different than what we cognitively think many times. Then we've got this term benevolent sexism. Ooh, I love this term. Gives me Gives me a chance to speak in my Southern accent, you know. Now, I think of this as Southern because I heard it so much when I lived and worked in the South, and I heard it coming from men. And men would say, well, I don't want my sweet little wife out there in that hard business world with all those, mean, men and bad language and, competition and all. I just want my little darling to be able to stay home with the kiddies, and get her nails done and have her hair fixed. Yeah, and not compete with you or make more money than you or use her brain or use her college education or achieve or have her own merit in the world. Yeah, because you're so benevolent, you're so nice, you're just taking care of her. Yeah, right. Okay, ladies, we can all right now. Okay, guys, don't you do that. Then there's something called the rule of reciprocity, which means if I do something for you, then you do something for me. It's reciprocal. And there's some different techniques. Ones that, if people are trying to sell you stuff, they'll use this rule of reciprocity. I'm going to do something for you, you do something for me. So we see, and we see it used in personal situations as well. Let's say I come up to you and I say, you don't happen to have $10,000 laying around that you could invest in my new company, do you? You go, I'm a student. Are you kidding? Oh, well, I see. Well, maybe $1,000. Didn't you get some money from your grandpa when he died? My company's really good. You could invest that $1,000. No, I don't think so. I don't think grandpa would want me to invest my college money in your company, but thanks very much. So then it's $500. So finally it's like, look, could you just help me out? If I get 20 investors at $50 a piece, I'll have my $1,000. Could you invest $50 and buy a share of stock in my new company? You go, well, okay, I can do that. I can buy a share of stock in your company for $50. Don't we all wish we'd bought some stock in Microsoft back when he was, begging for people to invest? Okay, so the whole point is they didn't really expect to get the $10,000 or the $1,000 or even the $500. All they want is 20 people to put $50 a piece in, so they've got $1,000 to go do something with. And then if you watch TV infomercials at all, you have seen or heard that's not all. Here, buy this, and that's not all. Get a second one for free. And in addition, that's not all. Get this doodad and that thingamajig along with it at no additional cost, just shipping and handling. Yeah. That's not all. Buy one, and that's not all. Get the second one half price. Ooh. All right. So those are techniques that are used to manipulate you. That's why they're in this chapter. And then there's the rule of commitment here. The foot in the door. We talked about this earlier with entrapment, that, the small petition that you sign, and then please, won't you donate money to help feed the puppies? And we all hate that because we get caught in it. And then there's the lowball technique. Textbooks, 60% off. Okay. And then you go to the site where they have textbooks, 60% off. And these are the ones that nobody uses anymore. These are the textbooks that have had the covers ripped off and the pages missing, and they've been used under the wobbly table leg. The textbooks that you need, oh gosh, I'm so sorry, they're not 60% off. I fell for this one time. I went to a site that said all Birkenstocks, like 80% off. And I went to the site, I'm all excited because I like Birkenstocks. Well, it was okay if I wore a size 12, which I don't wear. Okay, but the cute styles and the good sizes, no. They were not on that site. The cute shoes and the regular sizes were very much higher in price, but that's what we call the lowball technique. All right, guys, that's the last of the slides. Remember, I'm giving you this information to help you not be a sheep so that you can look at the world and say, wait, you're trying to get me to do something that I don't really want to do. And guess what? I'm not going to fall for it today. Getting wiser is all part of seeing these patterns in society because they're everywhere. Okay, I'll let you go for now, and I'll see you when we get into psychological disorders. Okay, bye now.